Wendelin is an office worker, tired as usual coming back from work. Due to exhaustion, he wishes to relax but reluctantly prepares his meal for lunch. Just as he finishes preparing his food and is about to eat, he involuntarily falls asleep from fatigue. When he wakes up again, he finds himself in a strange place with completely different food in front of him. He notices his hand looks strange and has become small, like a child's. He looks at his reflection in the plate and is shocked to realize he has turned into a small child. Confused, he perceives that the place is indeed strange and there's a wedding celebration happening around him. He mutters to himself that this must be a dream, but it feels oddly real. Suddenly, a man approaches him and asks him what he's doing. This startles Wendelin, confirming he's still in the dream as nothing has changed. At that moment, the man quickly wakes him up, urging him to greet the guests. Wendelin is stunned as he realizes he's still in the dream and nothing has changed. At this point, his father appears and tells the guests that Wendelin is his youngest son. Still not fully comprehending what's happening around him, Wendelin is nervous and finds it hard to speak. Then, suddenly, Eric appears, introducing himself to the guests and also informing them about Wendelin. Wendelin is surprised to hear that his name is the same in this new life. Eric explains to the guests that Wendelin is just nervous because it's his first time attending such a celebration. This celebration is actually the wedding of their eldest brother, Kurt. Afterward, Eric takes Wendelin to a quiet corner at the party, offers him tea, and begins to explain everything that's happening today. He tells Wendelin that it's their eldest brother Kurt's wedding to Amalie, the second daughter of a noble family. Eric reveals that their father struggled a lot to find a suitable match for Kurt from noble families because they are poor, which made it quite challenging. Wendelin is surprised and says, "So, if our brother married into a noble family, does that mean we're noble too?" Eric replies, "We are the Baumeisters, true nobles as well." Wendelin is ecstatic to hear that they are nobles too and thinks life will be wonderful and full of roses. He believes he will live in luxury from now on as the third child of this noble family, so life is going to be all rosy. The celebration continues, and Wendelin is very happy, thinking he must enjoy life now that he's the third child of this noble family. The next morning at breakfast, the food is dry bread and some vegetable soup. Wendelin is shocked by the drastic change in the house and the strange food. He asks his father where Eric is. His mother replies that Eric went fishing for lunch. A little later, Eric arrives home and Wendelin opens the door for him. Eric looks at Wendelin and, smiling, says, "Surprised by our luxurious food, aren't you?" Wendelin asks how they could afford the lavish party yesterday but be in this dire state today. Eric explains that they had to be very generous with the guests, even though they are poor, as it is a custom among nobles. Wendelin looks around the house and realizes that everything at the party was a facade. Even the damaged walls were just hidden by curtains. Eric explains that the food and decorations from yesterday were just for the wedding, and from now on, they will go back to eating dry bread and soup. Wendelin tries to console himself, thinking that even though this family is very poor, he is still the third son of a noble family, so there must be some benefits for him as a noble. At this point, more of his siblings return from hunting, and one by one, they appear until he is shocked to learn that he is actually the eighth son of this poor noble family, not the third. Wendelin is obviously disheartened and later goes to the highest point of their house, thinking about how he is the eighth son of this impoverished noble family ruling over a rural area far from the capital with about 800 villagers. He takes a walk outside, contemplating his miserable life. Suddenly, he sees Eric and the rest of his siblings leaving the village, with their mother tearfully bidding them farewell. Wendelin runs to them and asks where they are going. Eric replies that they forgot to tell him they had planned to leave after Kurt's wedding. Another brother tells him that he has to stay because he is still young, but they are old enough to find their own path. Wendelin asks why they don't stay and inherit the land. Eric explains that they are poor nobles and can't divide the land. All the property will go to Kurt as the eldest and heir. They are relinquishing their inheritance rights and leaving. Wendelin asks how they will live without their noble titles, to which his brother replies that one of them married the daughter of a minor noble family, while the others will work in the capital or as adventurers. Eric pats Wendelin and encourages him to work hard to avoid struggling in the future. Then they leave. Wendelin goes to the library, disappointed to find that all the books are useless. By chance, he finds a box containing a magic orb and a scroll with strange writings. He is astonished to learn that magic exists in this world but is very rare. Wendelin decides to try his luck and measure his magical ability with the orb. He reads the instructions on the scroll and tries to use magic on the orb, initially thinking it's a trick until the orb suddenly glows. Wendelin is shocked, and at that moment, someone in the forest senses Wendelin's magical energy. Back with Wendelin, he eagerly reads the rest of the scroll to learn more about magic, but is disappointed to find no useful information. information. He searches the library for any helpful book on magic, but they are all useless. His father walks in and, after looking for him, tells Wendelin to fetch some firewood from the forest. Wendelin goes to the forest and tries using magic, but he looks foolish and can't do anything useful. His actions are comical. At that moment, the man in the forest who sensed Wendelin's magic appears and says, "So, you're the one with the magical energy. You're quite young." Wendelin is terrified and points a stick at the man. The man apologizes for scaring him and introduces himself as a wizard, taking the stick from Wendelin and throwing it away. Unfortunately, the stick lands on a rock, causing a chain reaction that hits a large wild beast. The beast, seeing Wendelin and the wizard, charges at them in anger. Wendelin is petrified, but the wizard grabs him and tells him to imagine the magic, making him point his hand at the beast. Wendelin is terrified and says he can't do it, asking how he can suddenly use magic. The wizard tells him to accept the mana within him and then gather it. Wendelin successfully does this and casts a wind spell at the beast. The wizard congratulates Wendelin on his first spell. As the beast attacks again, the wizard destroys it with a powerful wind spell. Wendelin is frightened by the wizard's immense magical power. The wizard introduces himself as Alfred, a former court mage of the Duchy of Blaerad, and reassures Wendelin that he too will become a great mage, even greater than Alfred. The next morning, after breakfast, Amali gives Wendelin a drink called mate instead of tea, surprising him because it looks like plain water, but later he drinks tea with Alfred and is amazed by its magical flavor. Alfred tells him he wants to teach him his magic, shocking Wendelin, who asks why he would teach him magic, explaining he has no money or anything to offer. Alfred replies he doesn't want money, only for Wendelin to be his student. Wendelin eagerly agrees to do anything to learn magic. Alfred tells him they will start magic training tomorrow and that Wendelin must keep his magic training a secret. He explains that if the villagers know Wendelin can use magic, there will be a dispute over the succession to power. Wendelin is puzzled, saying he is the 8th son, so he can't become the ruler. Alfred explains that magicians have great power and influence in society, which could quickly make Wendelin the next ruler of the region, but the current struggle for succession would be dangerous for him as a child, so he must keep his magic use a secret for now. The next morning, Alfred trains Wendelin in magic. The first lesson is sensing magic and determining the maximum magical capacity. Alfred is astonished to find that Wendelin's magical energy is enormous, even greater than his own. Meanwhile, their father is in the library and notices the crystal ball is not in its place. Kurt enters, and they laugh about Wendelin, saying it seems Wendelin wished to become a magician. The following day, Wendelin continues his magic training and shows great progress, even using advanced magic, earning praise from Alfred. Wendelin notices Alfred has a basket full of vegetables and asks about it. Alfred explains that Wendelin told his family he would forage for food in the forest, so he brought some mountain vegetables for him. Wendelin returns home with the vegetables, making both his mother and Amali very happy, but Kurt is sulky and angry about the praise Wendelin receives. Their father notices that Wendelin brought a type of vegetable that is very hard to find, as one must fly over the river to get it, which is very difficult for someone his age. He laughs, asking if Wendelin flies using magic. Kurt begins to suspect that Wendelin is indeed using magic, which would be a threat to his succession after their father. The next day, Alfred teaches Wendelin wind control magic. Wendelin successfully uses magic to hunt birds with a stone, feeling very proud of his success. Alfred roasts the bird, and Wendelin loves its taste. Wendelin adds some herbs to the food, surprising Alfred, who asks about them. Wendelin explains he found the herb deep in the forest, and it tastes very good. Alfred comments that it must be delicious since Wendelin found it and adds a lot of the herb, to Wendelin's surprise. Afterwards, Alfred asks him not to venture into the forest again. He informs him that the forest is enchanted with various types of monsters that ordinary people cannot handle, yet it is rich in food resources and herbs that are hard to find elsewhere. Alfred then tells Wendelin that his brother Kurt is watching him during this period. Alfred expresses concern that Wendelin might discover his use of magic and fears losing his claim to the throne. He asks Wendelin if he wants to be a ruler, but Wendelin replies that he doesn't want that because it would cause problems with Kurt. Alfred suggests that Wendelin become an adventurer, a career suitable for him as a sorcerer. At this moment, Alfred feels an ominous energy and inwardly worries that time is running short and Wendelin needs more time for training. In the evening, Wendelin joins his family for dinner and informs them of his desire to become an adventurer. Naturally, everyone is saddened because Wendelin will leave home to join the Adventurers Academy. However, Kurt is notably pleased by the news. Unfortunately, Wendelin's father mentions they don't have the money for him to attend the academy. The next morning, Wendelin visits Alfred and learns that the duchy housing the academy academy is beyond the mountain range and is actually a bustling trade city. He also learns that even children there can join trade guilds to earn considerable wealth. However, Wendelin must first learn teleportation magic to reach Briarkeep, which is very far away. He asks Wendelin if this is instantaneous teleportation or levitation magic, and Alfred confirms it's levitation magic, taking him on a flight to show him the world from above. In the evening, Alfred resists a sinister curse that has taken hold of him again, worsening over time. The next morning, Wendelin learns from Alfred that today marks the last day of his training. Wendelin is deeply saddened because he won't see Alfred again. In the evening, Wendelin has dinner with his family and reveals that they discovered another civilization in the forest that, over time, turns humans into zombies. He describes the characteristics of these creatures to his family. At that moment, Wendelin realizes that Alfred has become one of these beings. He rushes off quickly, flying to Alfred, his teacher, who is deeply concerned about him. He meets Alfred and begins to understand everything, including how Alfred became one of these creatures. Afterwards, Alfred asks Wendelin to purify him before he fully transforms into a zombie. Initially hesitant, Wendelin eventually agrees and tearfully performs the purification ritual. Several years later, Wendelin turns 12 and bids farewell to his mother and Amalie, setting off for the duchy to enroll in the Adventurers Academy. After a few days, Wendelin arrives at the academy, feeling nervous because he had been in isolation for the last 7 years to avoid trouble. This has caused him communication issues with those around him. At this time, the other students are introducing themselves to the teacher in the classroom. Then the teacher gives them a specialization test so they can later train in groups. In the dining hall, Wendelin feels anxious because he doesn't know how to make friends and fears he will remain an outcast. But at that moment, all the students see him as a great magician and tell him they must prove to Wendelin that they are the best team, so he will agree to join them. They start introducing themselves. The boy is named Air, the girl with blue hair is Louise, and her red-haired friend is Aina. After that, another team arrives and fights with Air's team over who Wendelin will join. Then all the teams go hunting and return with their catch to the guild office to claim their rewards. Everyone is excited that after catching the biggest prey, they will be able to convince Wendelin to join them. Unfortunately, Wendelin returns and shocks them with his incredible power, having hunted many monsters and received a huge reward. The students, stunned, decide not to compete for Wendelin's inclusion in their team anymore due to his immense power, believing they will never convince him they are at his level. Afterward, Wendelin is still eager to make friends, so he invites everyone for a meal at his expense, but unfortunately, everyone has already left. Meanwhile, Air, Louise, and Aina feel disappointed that they have no right to rule their family lands or any grand dreams because they are the youngest siblings, despite potentially being the strongest. However, Aina becomes enthusiastic and says they won't give up and will keep hunting monsters in the forests until Wendelin recognizes them. The next day, the team goes hunting again, but this time a large group of fierce wolves attacks them. The team fights back but is quickly overwhelmed. At that moment, Wendelin notices the wolves attacking his classmates and decides to help them to become their friend. We return to the team struggling against the wolves. Suddenly, a wolf attacks Louise while she's unaware, but Air saves her at the last moment, getting injured in the process. The wolves suddenly all attack the team, but Wendelin appears and swiftly eliminates all the wolves with his powerful earth magic. He takes the team to the hospital to treat Air. The team thanks Wendelin and apologizes for causing him trouble and for trying to gain his approval. Aina tells him she understands the truth now after seeing his powerful magic, and that they have given up on the idea of him joining them. However, they will still continue their path to become stronger in the future. The teacher then arrives, reassures them, and informs them that all the academy students will meet the Duke personally at the party. On the day of the party, everyone is dressed in their best clothes and ready for the event, with the Duke himself in attendance. The Duke's assistant informs him of Wendelin's presence at the party. The Duke approaches the students, and Aina thinks he is heading toward her team to talk, but he passes by her and speaks to Wendelin, greeting him warmly. Aina feels embarrassed as the other students laugh at her. The Duke talks to Wendelin, expressing his joy that someone from the Baumeister family has come to the party and overcome the mountains in great cost, as other families had been upset by the Baumeister family's refusal of the Duke's invitations in the past. Wendelin responds that the Duke surely knows the family is currently in a financial crisis, barely scraping by in their poverty. The Duke then asks Wendelin to accompany him inside the castle. Wendelin agrees but asks to bring bring his team with him. Everyone is surprised, and Wendelin takes Air, Louise, and Aina with him. Inside the castle, Wendelin meets the court magician Brantag and the former court magician Alfred, who start talking about Alfred being a longtime lich and that his dream was to find a student to pass on his magic. This was difficult because Alfred was one of the top 5 magicians in the world, but since his magic bag is with Wendelin, it is certain that Wendelin is Alfred's student. They then talk about Alfred and his final moments. After a period of conversation, the team leaves, feeling disappointed because they had thought of using Wendelin and believed he was different from them when he is in the same situation. Wendelin then comes and apologizes for their misunderstanding and tells them they don't deserve to be in his team because they were thinking of exploiting him to improve their lives. He tells them he is also sorry for using them so he wouldn't have to go alone with the Duke. They laugh and finally form a team together. At that moment, the Duke and the court magician arrive and give Wendelin a reward for returning the supplies, which is 1,000 gold coins. The court magician Brantag also tells him he will inherit his master Alfred's possessions. The next day, Wendelin and his friends head to his brother's wedding, riding a magical flying ship. Air is terrified of being on the ship, so Brantag reassures him, saying there's no need to worry because magical ships don't fall easily. Just as Air begins to feel safe, Brantag senses a strange energy heading their way and tells Air that while it's not impossible for the ship to fall, it could happen if a giant dragon attacks. At that moment, a giant skeletal dragon with an evil aura appears. All the passengers on the ship are terrified. The ship's guard reassures them that everything will be fine because the great duchy magician Brantag is with them and will take care of the dragon. Unfortunately, Brantag tells the ship's captain that he can't defeat the dragon because it's a zombie. The only solution is to purify it with cleansing magic, which he doesn't know how to use. Everyone is anxious and doesn't know what to do. Brantag reassures them and looks at Wendelin, telling them not to worry because there's another powerful magician here who can solve this problem. Wendelin, scared, says he can't defeat the dragon. Brantag encourages him, saying that if Alfred were here, he would be delighted to take down the dragon. Hearing his master's name, Wendelin gains courage and faces the dragon. The dragon breathes deadly breaths at Wendelin, but he quickly dodges them, destroying the forest behind him completely. Wendelin looks back at the ship to check on it and sees that Brantag is protecting it with a magical barrier. Reassured that everyone is safe, Wendelin continues to counter the dragon's attacks. He starts gathering energy to purify the beast. After gathering enough energy, he successfully purifies the dragon and collects all its bones, noticing the dragon's heart gem, which amazes him. Wendelin returns to the ship, where everyone is happy and celebrates his victory over the dragon. The magician tells Wendelin that everything is fine and that they will reach the capital safely. Wendelin replies that he's glad because he wants to buy many things in the capital. Suddenly, an old man appears and speaks to Wendelin. Brantag welcomes him, saying, "Hello, Arterio, you're on this ship too." Arterio replies that he enjoyed watching Wendelin defeat the dragon. Brantag introduces Arterio to Wendelin, explaining that he was one of his partners when he was an adventurer. Wendelin, surprised, asks if they were on the same team. Brantag explains that Arterio now heads a major trading company in the capital with significant political influence. Wendelin welcomes him and asks what he meant earlier about shopping being difficult. Arterio reassures him that he'll understand everything once they reach the capital. The next morning, the ship arrives at the capital's port, and Air suggests they explore the town a bit first. The team agrees, and at that moment, Brantag says he has some commitments to take care of quickly and rushes off, leaving them with Arterio. Suddenly, a large number of knights appear. The leader of the knights steps down and thanks Wendelin for defeating the ancient bone dragon. The leader opens the royal carriage for them, saying that the king is waiting for them at the castle, shocking everyone present. Wendelin and Arterio head to the royal palace. When Wendelin enters the king's hall, someone introduces him to the king as the slayer of the ancient dragon. After that, Arterio and Wendelin greet the king, and the king grants Wendelin the title of baron, making him an official noble independent of his family. At the same time, the king gives him the twin dragon medal, the highest medal in the country. Next, the army commander and the finance minister argue about the value of the reward Wendelin should receive for the dragon's bones. Eventually, the wise old man intervenes and sets the reward at 150,000 gold coins, leaving Wendelin bewildered. Arterio explains that they're fighting to show their support for him so that he will be loyal to them in the future. Meanwhile, Wendelin's team is with his brother and Brantag, discussing how Wendelin now has a higher title than his father, who is a knight, while Wendelin is a baron. parent. This means he can establish a new branch independent of the family. The team worries that Wendelin won't go on adventures with them anymore. Brantag reassures them that Wendelin, as a landless noble, can do whatever he wants, which makes the team very happy as Wendelin can continue adventuring with them. After leaving the palace with Arterio, Wendelin encounters guards showcasing their skills, hoping he'll hire them, which surprises him. Arterio explains that this is the price of fame and that many people will want him to hire them, including wealthy merchants who will want him to marry their daughters. Wendelin is even more shocked when he learns he shouldn't go out in public for a while. The next morning, Wendelin arrives at his siblings' wedding party and notices they're not happy at all. He asks why, and they tell him their impoverished family embarrassed them again by not sending wedding gifts, claiming poverty as usual. Aina says this will cause problems for the duchy, and the Duke will be very angry. Wendelin is puzzled, so his brother explains that the family's poverty will reflect badly on the Duke as they are his vassals, and they can't ask the duchy for money because they can't repay it. To resolve the situation, Wendelin decides to pay for and bring the luxurious wedding gifts himself, covering for his impoverished family. He completes the task, bringing the gifts, and the wedding ends happily. After the wedding, Arterio approaches Wendelin and teases him about being a noble, then gives him rice as a gift from a trader friend in the north. Wendelin is delighted with the rice and rushes back to his castle with his friends. There, he prepares a delicious meal of rice and soup, which everyone enjoys. At the same time, the church leader summons his granddaughter and tells her that he has found a suitable groom for her. The next day, Wendelin visits the church elder to thank him for his help with the king and gives him a simple gift. They chat for a while, and the elder's granddaughter, Alice, comes in to serve tea. The elder tells her to introduce herself, and Wendelin notices she has a lot of magical energy, meaning she uses magic too. The elder explains that Alice uses healing magic, which impresses Wendelin. They talk about Alice and her abilities and how many noble families are competing to marry her because of her powers. Wendelin jokingly says he might have to join the competition, and the elder asks if he really wants to marry Alice. Wendelin laughs and says yes, but is surprised when it becomes serious, and he is now engaged to Alice. Later, the church elder and his head servant talk about Wendelin's shock at the sudden engagement, laughing at him. The elder asks his servant's opinion on Wendelin's amazing gift of a large amount of gold coins, and they consider that Wendelin is not only skilled in magic, but also wise and knowledgeable in management. Wendelin returns to his castle and tells his friends about what happened and how he got engaged to Alice, the church elder's granddaughter. His brother and sister-in-law suggest he disguise himself as a jester to go shopping without being recognized. They go to the market, and people stare at Wendelin, wondering why he looks like that. Air tells him to ignore them and enjoy shopping, letting him choose sweets from the store. While walking through the market, Wendelin notices the warrior with the spear who always wants to be his follower and gets nervous. Air reassures him that he won't be recognized. However, the warrior calls out to Wendelin, recognizing him by his teeth. Soon, all the warriors gather around Wendelin, wanting to be his followers. Wendelin uses teleportation to escape with Air quickly. Back at the castle, Wendelin is very upset because he can't even enjoy his summer vacation like normal people. His brother suggests hiring a follower to reject all the warriors wanting to join him. Wendelin likes the idea, and Air jokingly offers to be his follower. Wendelin takes it seriously, agrees, and gives Air a gift, thinking to himself that he needs to go on an errand quickly. Wendelin heads to the church elder's house to meet Alice. He ends up at the church elder's window, quickly hiding on the ground to avoid being seen, but Alice catches him. He takes her to the rooftop, saying he brought sweets and thought they could eat them together. But the sweets get squished, embarrassing Wendelin. He tells Alice he wanted to talk about their engagement and asks her opinion. Alice says she's very happy to be the wife of the dragon-slaying hero. Back at the castle, Air surprises Louis and Aina by announcing he's now Wendelin's first follower. They are upset because this means Air will be the senior if they become Wendelin's followers. Louis then gets the idea that they should marry Wendelin to outrank him and boss him around. As they plot how to convince Wendelin, Wendelin meets the church elder's head servant, who invites him to dinner with his fiancée, Alice. Wendelin goes to dinner, and after they finish eating, the head servant suggests buying a gift to commemorate their first dinner together. The head servant takes them to a jewelry shop, and Wendelin and Alice look at engagement rings. Wendelin notices they're all very expensive and comments on the typical behavior of the foolish nobles. Wendelin likes a ring, and Alice tells him he doesn't need to buy her something so expensive. Wendelin assures her it's no problem, since he received a large reward from the king for slaying the dragon. He asks about the price of the ring, and the jeweler says it's very expensive at 300 gold coins because it's a magical ring. Wendelin is shocked by the amount but buys it to avoid embarrassment in front of Alice. On their way back in the carriage, they talk, and Wendelin performs a magical light show with the ring, easing the tension between them. When they return to the castle, the church elder asks his head servant about his opinion on Wendelin. The servant replies that he doesn't fully understand Wendelin yet, but he treats Alice like an ordinary girl and doesn't exploit her status. The next morning, Air asks Louis and Aina about their plan to marry Wendelin. They say they're not in a hurry. As they talk about Alice being in the capital, Alice suddenly walks in, shocking them. Wendelin's brother explains she's there to visit Wendelin. Air tells her Wendelin went to the castle. Alice says it doesn't matter. She wants to learn more about Wendelin from them. Meanwhile, Wendelin is with the king, who asks him to kill another dragon. As usual, Wendelin accepts the request to avoid the king losing his head. The captain of the knights then explains the plan and the area where the mission will be carried out to Wendelin and the duchy's mage, stating only mages can withstand the dragon's breath. Wendelin is surprised and asks if it's just the two of them facing the dragon. The king reassures him, saying there's another person. At that moment, a powerful-looking mage enters and greets the duchy's mage, Brantag. Brantag smiles and says, "Are you the third one?" They shake hands, and the mage looks at Wendelin, recognizing him as the hero who slew the ancient dragon. The mage is so impressed with Wendelin that he forgets he's in front of the king. When he remembers, he greets the king and says they'll set out for the mission immediately, promising to take down the dragon. His magical energy flares up with excitement, astonishing Wendelin. Brantag introduces the mage as Armster, the royal court mage. The three set out on the mission, with Armster explaining they need to first go to the military outpost in the Balkinia wilderness to plan their attack on the dragon. Wendelin is skeptical, thinking they'll face many problems there. Days later, back at Wendelin's castle, his brother and friends are there. His brother informs them that Wendelin will be gone for a few more days as they need to eliminate all the monsters in the wilderness. Killing the dragon will agitate the monsters, causing them to attack nearby towns. This could lead to significant problems, so they must wipe out all the monsters. Thus, Wendelin will need to form his own army as a noble of the kingdom. Louis is surprised, pointing out that usually a noble with land and an existing army would handle this, not a landless noble like Wendelin. Wendelin's brother reveals that the court tasked Wendelin with this because they didn't want to hand it over to other nobles. Suddenly, they hear noise outside from warriors wanting to join Wendelin's army, the Baron Baumeister's army. Wendelin's brother mentions that Wendelin was supposed to choose the soldiers himself, but since he's not here, his follower should handle it. Air is shocked since he's the only follower and now has to lead the army for Wendelin in his absence. He's very nervous, but his friends encourage him. Air takes the army to Wendelin, which consists of noble sons and masterless followers, all hoping to gain fame from this battle. They camp in the forest at night, and the friends are tense since it's their first battle. Alice visits to check on Wendelin, but he's already gone to camp near the dragon for a dawn attack. In the morning, Wendelin, Brantag, and Armster stand before the dragon's lair. Armster loudly calls out to start the battle, awakening the dragon. Armster prepares his powerful magic shield and attacks the dragon. Wendelin notices Armster's immense power, realizing he doesn't need them for the fight. Brantag explains that Armster is focusing all his energy on holding the dragon because his shield quickly drains his magical mana, leaving the final blow to them. We see the dragon trying to escape from Armster but being stopped, allowing Wendelin to deliver the final blow, killing the dragon. Meanwhile, the friends sit with Alice, drinking soup. Alice enjoys the atmosphere, and they receive news of the dragon's defeat, causing everyone to rejoice. Alice then goes to the healing tent to treat the wounded with her magic. We learn the battle is intense due to the massive number of monsters. The army's resilience is thanks to the mages, but the soldiers are worried because the mage's magic has limits. Alice is very concerned about Wendelin and continues helping the injured, using her magic ring when her own magic is exhausted. Finally, Alice goes to rest, and a warrior tells her he heard she's Wendelin's fiancé, praising Wendelin as a true hero, crediting the army's endurance to him. Encouraged, Alice continues aiding the wounded all day until she's exhausted, wanting to be worthy of Wendelin. In the morning, Alice is very tired and hears someone from the Baumeister family is injured, thinking it's Wendelin. She runs out, only to find it's Wendelin's brother. Wendelin calls her, and when she sees him safe, She faints. Wendelin takes her to rest. When she wakes up, he's sitting beside her, telling her to rest. He praises her efforts, saying he heard about her achievements from the soldiers during the battle. Alice is happy with his words. Suddenly, Armster rushes to Alice, revealing she's his niece, shocking Wendelin. The next morning, they head to their new headquarters in the capital, with the servants preparing the castle. Alice visits Wendelin. Several days later, Wendelin's brother, Helmut, also marries a girl from a knightly family. Helmut tells Wendelin that the reason noble families are linking themselves to them is that they are Wendelin's brothers, creating a connection with him. Wendelin feels embarrassed and says there must be other reasons. His brother replies, "No, you need to understand your worth now, and you should also participate in the martial arts tournament that happens every 3 years." Wendelin decides to participate in the tournament and tells them he will compete in the magic category. His brother responds that magic is banned in this tournament, which relies solely on martial arts, and a noble who isn't skilled with a sword loses status among everyone. After the party, Wendelin's team gathers and trains for the tournament. Air feels frustrated about not having magic but doesn't give up and keeps running. They notice Wendelin heading to meet the head of the church. At that time, Brantag is sitting with Air, Lewis, and Aina, telling them they also need to participate in the tournament and must prepare well because losing in the preliminary rounds will embarrass their lord, Wendelin, in front of the nobles. In the evening, Wendelin tells the team that Alice will also join their team, which was the reason for his visit to the head of the church. The team notices Wendelin is very excited about the tournament, and they ask him why. He replies that he doesn't want to embarrass himself in front of the nobles. The next day, Air is very excited and trains diligently, to the point that the rest of the team can't keep up with his running and get exhausted from training. The entire team starts training hard to win the tournament, and Wendelin is impressed by their diligence. During this time, Air's hands bleed from the strenuous training, but he continues anyway. In the evening, Wendelin tells Air that Farron, the Royal Knight Commander, will also participate in the tournament. This news disheartens Air, as he wonders how he could defeat the kingdom's strongest swordsman. Air goes to his room, feeling very upset, but his friends come to encourage him. However, he tells them they'll never understand him because they all have magical abilities, unlike him. This upsets his friends, and they leave. In the morning, Air goes to Wendelin, about to ask if he could be removed from the team if he doesn't win the tournament. He notices Wendelin is asleep and doesn't hear him. Air wakes Wendelin up, who tells him he was waiting for Alice to share her worries because she has the flaw of having weak physical abilities despite her strong magical abilities. That's why she trains secretly every morning. Wendelin explains that everyone has a certain deficiency. Encouraged, Air tells Wendelin that he will definitely win the tournament and asks him to watch. The next day, the tournament begins, and everyone is very excited about the matches. The first match starts between Wendelin and Farron, the Knight Commander. Wendelin loses in seconds against Farron and returns to the seats. Brantag jokes about his speed, saying it's as if he didn't enter the tournament at all and laughs at him. He tells Wendelin that the important thing now is for the rest of the team not to return quickly. Wendelin reassures him, saying that won't happen. Indeed, the team wins all their matches, but Lewis loses in the semifinals. Shortly after, Aina loses in the spear fight semifinals against the warrior with the spinning spear who wanted Wendelin to make him his follower. Aina tells them his name is Rudik, and he's not just skilled with his moves, but also very strong. Additionally, he was raised in a large merchant family and is adept at management and accounting. At that moment, Aina notices Wendelin is asleep and not hearing what she's saying. Alice apologizes to Aina, explaining that Wendelin fell asleep from exhaustion because he didn't sleep well the previous night since he personally prepared the food boxes. Meanwhile, Air wins all his matches until he reaches the final match against Farron. He gets injured in his arm from the intense fighting in the matches. He returns to the room to rest, and his friends urge him to withdraw and not overexert himself. They tell him that Wendelin values their health more than competitions and victories, and that Wendelin even made lunch boxes for everyone, which Air hasn't looked at yet. Air opens the lunch box and feels happy, but gets even more motivated, saying he has to enter this match to avoid bringing shame to Wendelin. After the tournament ends, all the team members gain mentors. Even Air becomes Farron's disciple, and Lewis's and Wendelin's mentor is the mage Armster. The next morning, Kurt, his father, and the villagers are working in the fields. At that time, Kurt's wife and children come to him, saying that a guest has come specifically for him. When he goes to the guest, he gives him a letter about Wendelin, which angers Kurt, revealing his lingering resentment towards his brother, Wendelin. He doesn't finish reading the letter, stating that this town has nothing to do with Wendelin and they don't want to hear about him. But Amali reads the rest of the letter and is shocked, telling him that it says Wendelin died on his latest mission. The scene shifts to Wendelin, revealing that 3 years have passed since training with their mentors. Wendelin and his friends are very excited as this is their first official mission. Brantag arrives and tells Wendelin that they have a special mission that needs to be executed quickly. Brantag tells Wendelin it is his duty as a noble to carry out this mission. Wendelin's team transitions to the mission, with Brantag supervising them. They are happy that Brantag is their supervisor, and they arrive at the diamond. Inside, Brantag explains the danger of the mission and the place, mentioning that the guild sent adventurers before, but they didn't return. Even the more experienced ones didn't return, implying a dragon is in the area. Wendelin asks why they were sent after all that, and Brantag responds, "What is your team called?" Wendelin replies, "Dragon Hunters." Brantag says, "That's why." At that moment, Wendelin looks back at his team and finds them hiding behind him. He tells them this isn't how adventurers should behave. Air responds, saying if they face even one breath from the dragon, they'd all be ashes. At that moment, they find a door inside the cave. Brantag opens the door and enters, but unfortunately, the room is a trap. Brantag tells them to get out quickly, but the door closes and hidden magic appears, binding their movements and transporting them quickly to another location. One by one, they think of a way to get out of the place. Lewis tells Wendelin to use teleportation, saying it will solve the problem. Wendelin shocks her by saying it's not that simple. He must know the location he was in and where he is now to teleport back. Since he doesn't know their current location, he can't use teleportation. The team regrets and asks him what the solution is now. Wendelin finds a staircase and tells them there is no choice but to climb it. They follow the path, and upon reaching the top, Brantag asks what they think is in the room ahead. The team gets nervous but enters the room. Inside, they find a large number of golem knights and comment that the person who designed this cave must be crazy. Suddenly, the room's door closes, and Brantag tells them the golems have awakened. Wendelin is about to attack the golems with his magic, but his friends stop him, saying he should save his magic since they don't know what lies ahead. They'll handle the monsters. The fight begins, and they defeat most of the monsters. Brantag assists with his defensive magic, telling Wendelin they need to support them too. The team continues fighting skillfully and defeats all the monsters. Then, Alice starts healing their wounds. At this moment, Aina notices the corpses of adventurers who died upon entering the cave and shows them to Wendelin. Suddenly, Lewis hears a noise and tells them to be quiet. She runs to check the stairs and is shocked by the large number of golems approaching. The team is stunned. Air asks if they will ever get a break. Brantag tells them to continue with the mission, and they move on. Wendelin is very worried about his team and asks Brantag when this will end. Brantag replies, "Who knows?" At this time, the king and Armster are sitting together. The king tells Armster it's been 5 days since they entered the cave with no news. Both the king and Armster are very worried about the team. The king mentions that there are rumors in the palace that they have died. Outside the king's chamber, two nobles who dislike Wendelin and those who support him are talking. One says, Wendelin must be dead, which is a big advantage for everyone. At this time, the head of the church arrives. One of the nobles asks him if he is very worried about his granddaughter and fiancé. The head of the church replies, "Not at all. I'm sure they are fine and will return soon," and leaves. However, he is very anxious and tense. Just as he leaves, the commissioner calls out to him and asks, "Are they really dead? Who is spreading these stupid rumors?" At this time, a cunning noble, the one spreading these rumors, tells his servant to take a letter to Wendelin's brother, Kurt, so his children can inherit the baron's lands and property. We return to Wendelin and his team in the cave. Wendelin is eating Alice's food and resting a bit to conserve his magic. At that moment, Alice is about to tell him to sleep and rest, but she finds he has already fallen asleep. The battle continues, and they clear rooms, heading upwards, not knowing when it will end. Air gets injured and says, "When will this end? We're going to die." Alice heals him. He says he hasn't even defeated Farron in a single duel and would regret dying before doing so. They continue until they reach the final room, where a large dragon attacks them fiercely. Brantag and Wendelin block the attack with their magic. At this moment, a large group of golem knights appears. One of them hits Aina, causing a severe injury. Alice quickly heals her, and the team deals with the knights while Wendelin and Brantag fight the dragon. They struggle against the dragon, and Brantag decides to support Wendelin with all his magical power. He gives Wendelin all his energy and collapses. Still, the dragon prevails. Alice then supports Wendelin with her holy magic, significantly increasing his power. Wendelin defeats the dragon but collapses along with Alice. The team finishes off the golems and lets Wendelin and Alice rest. They explore the place and find important magical books. When Wendelin and Alice wake up, Lewis, Air, and Aina discover a room filled with magical flying ships and find the exit. Everyone feels relieved and very happy. happy. After completing the mission, Wendelin and his team return to the royal palace. The chief accountant starts gathering all the resources Wendelin collected during his mission and calculates the reward. Shockingly, the total amount is 2 million gold coins for each member. Even Wendelin and his team are stunned by the massive amount. Since the amount is so large, the kingdom decides to distribute it over 20 years. Wendelin and his friends then head to the palace with Armister. At this point, Wendelin tells Armister that they will leave the capital and head straight to the duchy. Armister is surprised, and Wendelin explains that he has decided to search for the person who spread the rumor of his death throughout the country. He also learns from Armister everything that happened during his absence and why people fainted upon seeing him, all because of the rumors. The team tells Armister that they are not surprised by all this because they are always harassed for being close to Wendelin. They even considered rejecting the huge financial reward because it would only increase the envy towards them, and because Wendelin already pays them very generous salaries. They then agree to give the entire reward to Wendelin, congratulating him on his 10 million gold coins, making him the richest man in history. Meanwhile, all those who envy Wendelin gather at the evil Mr. Rocken's place, the one who spread the rumors about Wendelin's death. He tells them that even though Wendelin survived, the plan was still successful because all of Wendelin's enemies have finally gathered, making it easier to eliminate him. Later, Wendelin and his friends are in the palace, and someone is watching them from behind a window. At this moment, Wendelin continues talking to his friends, mentioning that he was thinking of appointing someone responsible for the palace in the capital during their absence. Aina suggests that he will need someone strong and wise enough to manage the palace like Wendelin, hinting towards Roderick, who still insists on serving Wendelin. Wendelin decides to throw a party for Roderick and asks him to join if he still wants to. Roderick cries with joy, happy that Wendelin trusts him and will make him responsible for the palace in the capital. They celebrate together and eat cake. At this moment, the team senses the presence of the person watching Wendelin from outside. They try to secure Wendelin quickly, but the person escapes fast, and Roderick promises Wendelin that he will find out who spread the rumors about his death. Wendelin responds that it would be very difficult since even the royal palace said it was hard to pinpoint the origin of the rumors, so it would surely be tough for Roderick alone. Roderick reassures him that he is up to the task and will find out who it is quickly, but for now, Wendelin needs to leave the capital as it has become dangerous for him. Wendelin mentions there is something important he needs to do first. At this moment, we learn that the person watching Wendelin is a young girl. Wendelin then goes to the research center and meets Lucas, the chief researcher, requesting to use his summoning tool. Wendelin uses it for his special summoning, and then leaves the center with a large cart carried by tuna fish, which smells terrible. Wendelin tells the team they all need to shower after returning to the palace. The girl continues watching from afar, sensing that Wendelin is planning something strange. But before she catches up to them, Wendelin and the team teleport instantly to the palace. Meanwhile, Roderick is investigating who spread the rumors about Wendelin's death and discovers it was Mr. Rockens. Back at the palace, Wendelin throws a big party, inviting everyone, including the high-ranking officials and the Duke. Armister laughs, noting that everyone here loves Wendelin for many reasons. Wendelin and Ellis then bring in a cart of food, which turns out to be tuna with a special sauce. Everyone is surprised but ends up loving the taste. Roderick then tells Wendelin that the one who spread the rumors was the chief accountant's brother, Mr. Rockens. Wendelin is shocked and asks how Roderick knew all this since they didn't know each other. Roderick reveals that Mr. Rockens was only using him to get back at his brother due to existing problems between them. Wendelin asks how Roderick found out, and Roderick explains that he is actually the son of Mr. Rockens from a woman of a modest merchant family, which is why Mr. Rockens does not acknowledge him as a son. Roderick also informs Wendelin that a messenger was sent to Wendelin's brother, Kurt, stating that if Wendelin died, Kurt's children would inherit Wendelin's title and properties. Roderick reassures Wendelin that he has taken the necessary actions. In the evening, Mr. Rockens' assistant tells him there's a rumor spreading throughout the country that he conspired to kill Baron Wendelin while he was in the cave. Mr. Rockens is shocked and claims it's all lies. His wife enters and informs him that an envoy from the palace is summoning him to the king immediately, leaving him panicked. We then learn that it was Roderick who spread these counter-rumors. He tells Wendelin that the best way to fight rumors is with other rumors. Wendelin warns that this might get them into trouble, but Roderick assures him they can simply deny it. Wendelin is glad that Roderick figured out who spread the original rumors. Ellis then presents Roderick with some tuna. At this this moment, the girl who has been watching Wendelin bursts into the party, running towards him. Air tries to stop her, but she knocks him down instantly. Suddenly, she stands in front of the tuna and starts eating all of it at once, surprising everyone. Marshal Edgar then arrives and introduces the girl as his daughter, Wendelin IA. He asks Wendelin IA what she thinks of Wendelin, and she replies that she's been watching him all this time, and he finally passed her test. Wendelin is happy and asks what exactly he passed, but she ignores him and asks Ellis for more tuna. Ellis takes her to get more. The marshal apologizes to Wendelin, explaining that his daughter is always interested in food, and Brantag reveals that this is due to hero syndrome, which grants immense magical power, constantly enhancing the body's muscles and causing a high metabolism that requires a lot of food. The marshal tells Wendelin this shouldn't be a problem since he is very rich now and suggests making Wendelin IA his personal guard. Wendelin asks why he would need such a powerful bodyguard when he plans to go to the duchy for simple, fun tasks. The marshal tells him that the Duke didn't inform him that he is going to exterminate the wild monsters in the area. The Duke arrives and explains the situation to Wendelin, saying he has an important request. Meanwhile, Amelie tells Kurt the news of Wendelin's death, and Kurt is pleased as his children will inherit Wendelin's properties. But Amelie is shocked when she looks out the window and sees Wendelin alive in front of her. After that, Wendelin and his team, along with Brantag, sit down with his father and brothers to discuss the mission assigned to them and negotiate their share of the bounty. Kurt's demeanor remains very harsh because he still resents his brother Wendelin, which irritates everyone due to his attitude and greed, but he eventually relents and grants Wendelin's team a reprieve. Later on, Wendelin visits his brother Himmlet and asks him if he always harbored such resentment towards him. Himmlet replies that it started when Wendelin left, causing Himmlet to become paranoid and fearful that the Dragon Slayer would usurp his position. Wendelin reassures him that he would never do such a thing. Himmlet's wife then tells Wendelin that he's wonderful and wishes him luck in purifying the forest from zombies, revealing that her grandfather was among them. Wendelin tells her that he knows, as he was a great companion, and he will surely return his gear. She expresses her wish that Wendelin had been the rightful heir instead of the madman Kurt. Himmlet adds that what she says is true and that everyone actually wants that. Wendelin and the team then head to the forest and begin killing zombies with the large shared magic circle between him and Ellis. Eventually, a large army of monsters and a huge dragon attack, but Wendelin defeats the dragon. At the same time, the team attacks the monsters and defeats them all, retrieving all the equipment sold by the adventurers. Later, Grandfather Marlin appears, recognized by the team from his shield. Strangely, he has transformed into a lich and can speak. He asks about his granddaughter and, reassured of her safety, passes his sword to Ellis to purify her. Afterward, Wendelin collects all the equipment from the deceased soldiers and returns it to their families in the village to bury in graves instead of bodies. As usual, the foolish Kurt tries to take all the old gear from the villagers, but Wendelin stops him. Kurt argues that the town is poor and he needs all these shields for their metal, but Wendelin hands him a large iron ingot, telling him he doesn't need to take shields from the townspeople, and walks away. Kurt seethes with anger while the villagers are overjoyed and thank Wendelin. Following this, Wendelin and his team go to the Duke's palace, where Wendelin informs the Duke that these are all the remains of his soldiers. The Duke thanks him and says he will send a message to Wendelin's father, the lord of their town, to come and manage the forest purification in the next period. Wendelin hesitates and says he cannot go anywhere other than his village. The Duke reassures him and says he will send the letter directly. Wendelin returns to the town. The Duke returns to the palace and tells the chief accountant that everything is going well with the plan. The Duke responds affirmatively. After that, Wendelin, Brantag, and their friends return to the town. The village warden tells them that she thought they had left for good. Wendelin replies that they did leave, but the Duke said they had to stay until they could identify all the dead soldiers, which will take a very long time because there are 2,000 soldiers. The village warden says that since this is the case, what does Wendelin think about participating in the funeral of the town's dead soldiers? Wendelin attends the funeral, and Ellis also participates. The villagers are interested in Wendelin and are happy with him, and notice that Brantaga's behavior has been strange in these past few days. At that moment, Amalie and her children come to the funeral, and Wendelin greets her and apologizes for not visiting her in the past few days. She says she understands that he was busy and that she is not upset with him. At the same time, the children are very happy that their uncle is the hero dragon slayer. They ask him to tell them about his fight with the dragons. Also, Air, Lewis, and Ina are performing a play about Wendelin's fight with the first great dragon. The party continues, and Wendelin is with Amalie, telling her that the children have indeed grown up. She replies that she has also grown up, and that her children are all she thinks about now. The children come to their uncle Wendelin and tell their mother that they want sweets. Wendelin says he will bring them right now and brings them water sweets, and they are very happy with them. Wendelin says goodbye to them afterwards. At that moment, the village warden comes and tells Wendelin that he can ask him for a request. He says that he will be the lord of the town instead of Lord Kurt because the town is under the administration of Kurt and it will not have a future. Wendelin says that he will not say that again in front of anyone, especially in front of his brother and father. The warden replies that he has cleared his conscience and that he is not interested in what happens after that, and that this is the desire of everyone, including the royal palace, and that this will not hinder him as an adventurer because he has a strong follower who can manage all this in his absence. Wendelin is surprised that the warden knows all these details. At that moment, Brantag comes and tells the warden that he is very smart, and that he did not think that a person from the suburbs could know all this. Wendelin asks Brantag what exactly is happening. Brantag replies that the royal palace wants him to be the new lord. Afterwards, Wendelin sits with Brantag and begins telling him about the plan that unfolded, how the royal palace had long sought to develop this vast land for exploitation. However, due to the incompetence of past rulers of this land, it remained neglected. Unfortunately, Kurt is a common and worthless figure. Therefore, the palace devised a scheme where Wendelin would provoke Kurt. Meanwhile, they would depose his father and appoint Wendelin as ruler thereafter. Brantag realizes that this plan has been in motion for a very long time, and even the substantial funds he carries are earmarked for future land development. At that moment, Wendelin is having breakfast with friends in the morning, visibly tense from these unfolding events and the palace's scheme. Soon after, guests arrive who are revealed to be Kurt's nephews. Wendelin engages them in magical games, and they become very joyful. Everyone notices Wendelin's anxiety about agreeing to the palace's request regarding Kurt's nephews, as they would be deprived of their noble future. Meanwhile, villagers visit Sir Major, Wendelin's father, and Wendelin, along with Hamlet and Brantag, intercept them. They express their desire for Wendelin to be the heir instead of Kurt and plead for him to become the ruler. Wendelin informs them that he is still considering and hasn't made a decision yet. Brantag observes that the village secretary is inciting the people and urging them to voice these demands. Brantag cautions Wendelin not to act rashly again, and the secretary agrees before departing. Later, Amali is near Kurt's room and finds his followers with him, urging him to quickly rid themselves of Wendelin or face significant problems. Kurt becomes furious and mad with rage, threatening to punish anyone who disobeys orders. Afterwards, Wendelin sits with his friends and ponders his brother's fate if he were to become the ruler. He fears they would turn against him because they wouldn't want a different leader. Wendelin is anxious about his brother and his family. He visits his brother and tries to persuade him to find a solution so he can remain as he is and not be ousted. Unfortunately, his foolish brother becomes enraged in the end and shouts at Wendelin, dismissing him. Wendelin leaves the room and encounters Amali and the children. Amali and the children go to the garden. Wendelin tells Amali that he tried everything to ensure no one would be harmed, but unfortunately, no one would approve of this solution. Finally, Amali tells him that all she cared about was her children and their future, nothing more, and she had to leave them in front of her, so they would get angry at her. She knows that calling this deception is possible, but she doesn't care except that she must ensure the future of her children. Later, Wendelin returns to his palace and starts making sweets with his friends. He tells them that he will accept becoming the ruler. He acknowledges that this decision won't please many people and, worse yet, it might harm them further. Unfortunately, he is determined that no one will be hurt or left to die. In the end, to achieve this, everyone must help him. At that moment, his friends are deeply engaged in Wendelin's words, ensuring they preserve the ingredients they are working on. Wendelin laughs at them. However, at that moment, Ellis and the other friends assure him that they will definitely help him and will stand by him. The next day, Wendelin starts setting up shops in the market. He begins selling everything possible, thus drawing the townspeople away from Kurt's followers' shops and exposing Kurt. Kurt becomes very angry and orders one of his followers to kill Wendelin and get rid of him. Enraged, Kurt shouts that facing a wizard means they will be killed quickly. Wendelin intercepts Kurt's followers on the road, surrounding them with his friends before they can escape. The next morning, one of Kurt's followers tells him that all the followers betrayed him. Kurt asks him angrily if Wendelin threatened them with his magic. The follower denies this, and we know that Wendelin has provided them with amazing opportunities, such as developing their craft in the capital and the duchy, which will allow them to find work elsewhere. This has driven all of Kurt's followers away from him and left him isolated. Wendelin finds a suitable house for Kurt and Amali's children, doing all this to keep them away from problems, disturbances, and shame because of their father. Although it won't be as comfortable as living in their homeland, it's still better than living in that disgrace. Wendelin takes Roderick to the church where Kurt will live after the problems occur to at least live there. At the same time, when Wendelin is walking with Roderick, the servant of Mr. Rokins takes a strange energy flute from him and rushes to him quickly. Kurt takes the flute from the servant and asks how much money he wants in exchange for it. The servant replies that it's compensation from Mr. Rokins for the false rumors spread about him. He explains that all that's required is cooperation in future projects for the region. Later, Branagh notices that Kurt is getting closer to them, and he informs Wendelin that the plan seems to be progressing, but the hired assassin has disappeared. Branagh suggests that since Kurt is alone now, it's his chance to kill Wendelin. Wendelin confronts Kurt and asks him what he's doing there. Kurt arrogantly replies that he knows Wendelin and his followers are there with him now, telling them to leave quickly. He then pulls out the flute and tells Branagh that he's surely a powerful wizard to recognize it. Branagh acknowledges its identity as the legendary dragon flute, explaining to Wendelin that with it, Kurt can summon a large number of dragons, overpowering even Wendelin's magical strength. Wendelin warns Kurt that his actions endanger everyone, including his family. Kurt dismisses Wendelin's concerns, claiming that once everyone is dead, he'll inherit Wendelin's possessions, develop the lands, become a better hero than him, remarry, and start a new family. Wendelin becomes angry and threatens Kurt, who counters by saying if he moves, he'll use the flute. Wendelin hesitates and becomes fearful. Kurt laughs, expressing satisfaction at seeing Wendelin helpless. He mocks Wendelin, claiming that everyone who dies today will do so because of him, nothing more. At this moment, Branagh uses his magic and strikes the flute swiftly, but nothing happens. Kurt laughs again, asserting his ownership of the flute at least. He blows into it, causing everyone to notice something strange. Branagh informs them that it's not the dragon flute, but the flute of malice, gathering all the malicious energy to transform its user into a hateful, monstrous zombie. Kurt begins transforming, filled with rage and hatred. Wendelin is shocked by his brother's transformation. Branagh urgently tells Wendelin that he must purify his brother quickly because he's essentially dead now. Kurt attacks Wendelin, but Ellis intervenes to defend him. Eventually, Wendelin manages to purify his brother to prevent further harm to his friends. The malice dissipates, and Wendelin directs it toward Mr. Rokin's mansion, where Kurt intended to take revenge if his assassination plan failed. Kurt is killed there during his own party. Roderick learns all the details of the event and informs Wendelin, expressing concern for Amali and her children's safety in the capital. Wendelin decides they should live secretly with his second son, Hemlet, for the time being, despite being very upset. He regrets that people call him a dragon slayer hero when he can't really save anyone. Branagh explains that the problem originated from the sudden appearance of the flute of malice, causing a significant issue. Armister adds that even after extensive research, they still don't know the flute's origin, posing a major problem. Wendelin doesn't understand the nobles' foolish problems and why they don't take responsibility. Branagh questions Wendelin's statement, reminding him that he, too, is noble. Later, Wendelin visits the royal palace and meets with the king. The king rewards him with all the lands for the town and appoints him as the new ruler. The king asks if there's anything else he desires. Wendelin requests 2 titles from the available ones, causing outrage among the nobles and causing problems in the ruling palace because no baron takes all this land. After a big argument, Armister enters with a simple trick, and finally, the king agrees to Wendelin's request and gives him the 2 titles. He promotes him to Earl immediately above the Viscount title. Everyone rejoices, thanking Wendelin, and the king takes out the sword, dividing the royal section. Meanwhile, the king is with Armister and understands the trick that happened and tells him that everyone in the room has represented their role very well, except for you, Armister. The scene shifts to Wendelin's palace, where Kurt's children are training together with swords. Wendelin informs Amali that he will pass on the 2 titles he received to their children once they grow up, though if they don't need them, they can choose not to accept them, whatever makes them comfortable. Amali is overjoyed and thanks Wendelin warmly. After this, Wendelin begins using his magic to help the workers develop the lands. He assists them tirelessly, but the magical work exhausts him to the point where he feels more like a lord than a laborer. He plans to establish sauce factories for Ariel Wendelin afterward. Soon after, the entire team and village residents gather and work together to advance the town.